Hello, and welcome to the Professional Pivot. I'm your host, Maggie Ruby, and I would like to thank you all for joining us. I would also like to take a moment and introduce our special guest, Todd Nakasone, who is a former colleague that I had the privilege of partnering with at Warner Brothers and Time Warner, who now leads a talent acquisition team of his own at a major entertainment company. Welcome, Todd.
Yes, great to be here, Maggie.
This is going to be so much fun. Um, and I really want to make a kind of like a side note before we dive into this. On this particular series, we always are very excited about the podcast topics that we share with you. But this three-part series is really, truly close to our hearts and not just focused on career advice. We are calling this three-part series the Game Changer series, and we will be focusing on the elements of building a world-class internal executive search function. Todd and I worked side by side as we created and pioneered one of the first in-house search models, and Todd is now looking to stand up a function in his own current company. I believe our shared history will lend to a conversation that will be very authentic and will allow us the opportunity to share insights, experiences, and dissect elements of successful internal search models and have some fun doing it, addressing topics and questions we feel many internal teams and companies might also have. The audience for this series is very broad, from heads of talent acquisition to CHROs, HR executives, CFOs, COOs, and CEOs. As this internal strategy not only impacts the company's most valuable asset, its talent, but it has a direct financial impact on a company's bottom line. So, to set the stage, we will be focusing on the following within each of the three episodes. Part one, which is today's episode, will be focused on building a search model from a blank piece of paper, drawing from Warner Brothers and Time Warner experiences. Part two, which will drop the following week, will be focused on re-engineering a function that already exists, drawing from IBM experiences, where the challenge wasn't a blank slate, but a model that existed and had tremendous opportunity for enhancements and scalability. Part three is the playbook. And I think this is going to really kind of tie it all together in a very nice way, as it will be focused on universal keys to success, the tools, the metrics, the mindset that separate a long-term, world-class internal executive search function from one that might get defunded in a year or two. So with that said, welcome to the Game Changer series. Todd, welcome back to my world. Are you ready?
I am ready, Maggie. So, Maggie, I've been waiting for this conversation. I've watched you build something extraordinary at Warner Brothers as well as Time Warner. Searches that companies were paying enormous retained search fees for. And while you're doing it better, faster with attracting candidates who actually stayed, I want to understand how you started from nothing. What was the catalyst for your first pivot in creating an in-house executive search function at Warner Brothers?
So this is kind of a fun reminiscent story of the origin of how this all really began. And I kind of want to start the origin off with one of my favorite quotes, which is luck is when preparedness meets opportunity. And often it is just simply being in the right place at the right time. So my first big career pivot was working at a retained boutique search firm in Pasadena, California. And I was doing six senior executive assignments for Warner Brothers, working directly with the head of HR, Adrienne Gary. And she called a meeting together, and this is back in the day when everybody, put binders together. So I had all my binders, and I'm ready for this update meeting. And we're at this really, really nice restaurant, and sit down, and I'm getting ready to go through all of the updates on the progress of the searches that I'm working on. And she said, you know what? I really want you to set those aside for a second. She said, I'm really here for a whole different topic. I'm tired of paying these obscene search fees. So if you want to talk about a catalyst, that was the catalyst, is that she was tired of these search fees. And she had the vision and a very progressive stance and says, you know what? I want you to come in and build it in house. And it was one of those moments that I'll never forget. I think I looked at my watch and I said, and what time would you like me to start? And it was one of those just extraordinary opportunities that really came out of left field. But I will be honest with her. She was such a visionary and also such a confident HR professional that she was fast to introduce me to all the key executives in the company, saying, this is Maggie, and we brought her in to do this. And so she was marketing me and introducing me and opening the door beyond words. I was very, very fortunate to have the opportunity to work for her. And I'll be honest with you, I genuinely believe that if that had not have happened, I'm not sure my career would be in the place it is right now. And then what she allowed me to do is really, I had a blank piece of paper. So she introduced me to all these key executives, shared what I was going to be doing, and then she let me vet a business plan, and I put it together, and then she allowed me to run with it. And one thing that I learned very early on is you have to have a pitch. So, like, why use us? So she's opened the door for me, but now I've got to go in and make kind of a sell. And so I'd put together a list of advantages of having an in-house firm, such as, no one knows a company and the business and the culture better than we do. We can shift from reactionary to proactive. We can anticipate search needs, put together comprehensive strategies which allow for exhaustive search, not just recycling the usual suspects, which typically happens with external search firms. And here's a big one. You need to have a big win out of the gate. So and I'm telling you, even if you have to pick like a super easy search, you need a big win. So you have an opportunity to have a win and a story to market and continue to build on. And I can remember my very first assignment. And again, she had pitched and introduced me. And so I was working with the highest executives in each of the business units at Warner Brothers. And so my very first assignment out of the gate was with a very high profile executive. It really was one of those things that it was me at the time. This was early stages. And I felt like I was building the airplane in midair. And I kept saying, I have to have a win. I have to have a win. And I was acting very confident when I was in the meetings because you can't ever let them see you sweat, so to speak. But I'm not kidding you. I was in these meetings, and I could feel the perspiration starting to bead on my forehead, and I thought, okay, this is either going to be a great win or this is so not going to work. And fortunately, it was a huge win. And then that experience spread throughout the organization incredibly quickly. And then the other piece that I think was an important takeaway early days was track everything and share your accomplishments and impact with senior management. So early days, I would put together a monthly accomplishment spreadsheet and make sure that the CEO was included on the distro. And all of that enables further funding. So you have to be able to tell your story. So that's kind of how this all began. And it was so exciting, but it was also nerve wracking. But then we were able to create something and build literally a business within a business, something that had never been done before. So it's a pretty cool origin story, I think.
So it actually wasn't just the fees that you were paying out, but it was also the intel that you were giving away by not owning the process internally. The relationships, market mapping, candidate intelligence, uh, competitive intelligence. It all walked out of the door with each particular firm that you engaged.
Yeah, I mean, spot on. Every time that anybody hires a retained firm, essentially you're paying for them to learn about your inner workings of the company, of your business, develop relationships with the company's key talent. Oftentimes they'll have an eye on them for like maybe recruiting them out from under you down the road, and develop external candidate relationships for you. And at the end of the engagement, they own the knowledge, not you. And it walks out the door with them.
What are some of the other key takeaways you could share about those initial conversations?
I think the biggest thing that was staggering, being internal, was the numbers add up rapidly. So, especially if you're dealing with VP and above level searches. So, you think retained fees are 30 to 33 and a third percent of first year's base and bonus. And that's actually a conservative calculation because it doesn't include other cash incentives. But with just a few searches, the annual retained fees can be in the millions of dollars. And here's the sell: it's better to use that money to invest in an internal search model where you own your own talent. And then the other piece that was fascinating was the cultural fit is also so incredibly critical. And internal teams live and breathe it. A perfect example of this would be, if you look at a chief marketing officer, for example. So Time Warner at the time had over 8 divisions, but all the divisions had unique cultures and dynamics. So, for example, New Line Cinema had a very entrepreneurial flavor to it. Turner was very structured. So you could take a CMO that had incredible, impeccable credentials, but if they didn't fit in, you could put that CMO into New Line and they'd fail miserably, or you could put them into Turner and they'd be wildly successful. And so you could have the right competencies, but if the culture didn't match, it wasn't going to work. And only internal teams really, truly understand that. And I think what's interesting is culture is not only just division to division, it's department to department. So when you're inside, you really see all the inner workings and you build those relationships and you walk down the halls and you can feel the dynamics of the culture. And the cultural dynamics truly, truly vary. And only an internal team will know the difference. And I think the other piece is internal search really builds compounding intelligence. So each search makes the next one faster and sharper. So you just keep getting better and better. And then the word gets out. And then here's a big lesson that I learned, and this was early days, and this is kind of just a sidebar. But I used to think, bigger, better, more is better. And so I used to always like put these decks together of everything that we could accomplish. I want to make sure everything was covered. And these decks could be, an inch thick. And I was going around and I was making the presentations and the pitch, especially when I was transitioning from Warner Brothers to Time Warner Corporate. And I was working with one of the co-CEOs, and he has a copy of the deck. I have a copy of the deck. We're going page by page. And he said, Maggie, I don't mean to interrupt, but he said, I'm going to make a bet. If I flip to the very last page, I bet you there's an executive summary that says everything that I need to know. And he said, so my recommendation, sure enough, he flips to the back page, and that's exactly what was there. And he said, so my recommendation is start with that. And if you want to do some support documents as addendums, then they can follow. But that executive summary is so I learned more is not better, less is better. But it's just, these are the tricks of the trade that you learn over the course of time. But that was just one of those stories that you go, wow, What a lesson, you know?
Well, that's a great segue to my next question. How did you get in the door to actually ask for buy-in and create that those internal champions to get this whole thing off the ground?
I think, and I know this sounds maybe cliche, but going on listening and learning tours, it the investment in time to meet with key decision makers and get their feedback on what they are looking for in ideal search experiences. I cannot stress enough about what how important that investment in time is. So, for example, when I was meeting with and trying to build out and work with all the different divisions and create a corporate center of excellence for an internal search model, I would ask questions like, what are important things to you? And some of the answers were like knowledge of business, quality of candidates. We need to fill the roles quickly, superior service. One of the big ones was ease of process, client group ownership, strategic versus proactive, strategic and proactive versus reactive. Cost savings, interestingly enough, was kind of more towards the bottom of the list, interestingly enough. But also, because your inner workings, they wanted to also have the ability to identify and move internal talent around and identify top tier diverse talent prior to positions being open. And so what was interesting is that everyone had a slight variation, but there was very distinct common denominators that were collected in the feedback sessions. So one of the things that I did was I took that information and used the common denominators to build a model around what the feedback was. So essentially, what's happening is that I've said I've collected all this information. These are the common themes, and I've now built an infrastructure around it of what you say you need. And essentially, what that meant was that the people that had given feedback now feel that they have skin in the game, that they actually built the model. And that really, really helped in terms of them being more supportive, to use the team and help and support with the success. And I think the last thing that's important to do is you the reason a listen tour, take the time and ask the questions is the last thing you want to be is a know-it-all and go in and act like you know exactly what they need. And I've never wanted my function in any company I've ever worked for to be a mandate, because anytime you're a mandate, it just gives everybody an opportunity to poke holes in what's not working, and that's just human nature. So I would rather be a center of excellence that is a place that they want to go because they see value add, as opposed to a place that they have to go to, if that makes sense.
Right. So you built, this watertight business case, but it really means nothing without the right people championing you and rooting for your success. Who were your initial champions in this particular case?
So in my and actually this kind of overflowed into other companies as well. I would say that one of the very first and most important partner in crime to build a relationship with is the chief CHRO. Without the head of HR owning the initiative strategically, not just approving it administratively, it's always someone else's project unless they have the buy-in and they own it. And I think the one thing that was very important is everything that we did as a team was about the individuals that we were partnering with. It was their wins. They owned it. It was their talent. It wasn't about us. And I think that also was a big, big, big win. But CHRO, I would tell you, is critical. And they also can open the door and invite you in, and they can close the door very quickly. So CHRO, I would say, would be top of the list. And then I would say get some buy-in from a few C-suite business executives, key stakeholders. And in a perfect world, if you can find somebody who might not have had a good experience with a search firm, or the quality of placement didn't stick or last, or it didn't live up to expectations, they had to redo the search. Um, Give them one great search result, and then they can become one of your best advocates. So I think you get CHRO, then you kind of get the top of the house, a couple of, even if it's just one, but I'd say if you can get a couple of C-suite key stakeholders, that would be terrific. And then this is when you make the big, big, big move. And one of the most critical partners is the CFO, because they're responsible for the financial impact of the organization. They own the funding. So it's important to, in a perfect world, go in already having established relationships, ideally with the CHRO, or some key executives, individuals that they interact with a lot. But I think what's also really, really important is when you meet with the CFO, you really have to do your homework. You have to be able to speak to the numbers, the data, the analysis, the cost savings, and be able to crisply present a business plan with an emphasis on quality of hires and, very importantly, the cost savings and impact to the bottom line. Because if they see how not only do we get the best of the best talent, which is a key advantage for the company, but we can also have a direct impact on the bottom line, then that's a superstar win. And then the last component, and this kind of sounds unusual maybe, but to partner with legal and the compliance department. And I think it's important to understand, to one, they can also give you some guidance on where you could be in a danger zone or where you're not. But they can also help you through conflicts of interest if that happens to be the case. They can help you with offer letter processes. And then if it, especially in a critical build out, if it's global, international compliance and privacy. I'll try to speak a little British here for a second, but privacy issues. And if you're dealing with multiple languages, country by country, it is staggering. And so understanding and having global legal and compliance partners is profoundly helpful. And I think a lot of people skip over that mix, and then they wind up kind of having to backtrack, and they're trying to undo something that they could have potentially prevented if they had partnered with them up front.
Absolutely. And, speaking about the numbers, I think when you develop the business case, obviously the financials do get impacted. So, when making your business case, a big part of that is going to be the financial aspects of that business case. What are the best numbers and metrics to run with and present to actually build that business case?
I think this that knows me is going to laugh at this one, but one of the my that I'm very, very, very known for is let the numbers tell the story. And because then you're talking about not hypotheticals or theoreticals, you're talking about statistics, and you can back it up with numbers. And so examples of data that I pulled to help create a business plan are things like, it's very important to understand the key business drivers, the growth businesses by division within your organization, because those key business drivers are going to predict the openings and the talent needs that are going to be required in the future. Attrition is huge because that's going to help you do the math to figure out the volume. Types of positions by division is important, and it sounds silly, but it's important in the sense that if you're going to put an infrastructure together with specialists, search professionals, Sometimes they're discipline specific, sometimes they're geographically aligned. But I think that the types of positions is very, very important because that helps you with the right infrastructure. So I actually pull those. Volume of recruitment efforts. Volume is just, I think, a straightforward one. Structure of existing recruitment teams, because in most companies, whether they're located in divisions or they're sprinkled throughout the organization, there are existing recruiters. And so, how do you capitalize on tying that together and leveraging the existing talent that's there? And then expenses. That is where the search fees, and these could be internal expenses, they could be external expenses. But there's always expenses associated with recruitment, always. So understanding what those numbers are is very, very important. And then I think recruitment systems, whether they're already in play or if they're needed. And if they're in play, are they the right systems? And there's always going to be some sort of dollar attached to that. But that investment in recruitment systems, and when we start talking about the right infrastructure and the metrics and the KPIs and everything, and systems and operations, we'll talk a little bit more on that. But recruitment systems can really break or make a function. And then simplicity of process flow. Make it as simple as possible. And what's interesting is that really recruitment is pretty straightforward. Executive search is pretty straightforward. There's a methodology and a science behind it. So the easier that you can make it for the hiring executives and the experience for the candidates, it's a win-win across the board. So those would be examples of things that I pulled together to create a business plan.
So then how do you position that particular search firm model, the internal search firm model, against, existing external firms that the company's been used to using for years and years and years?
Which is inevitably always going to be a topic of discussion. You can just, bank your bottom dollar on it. What I've always done is I created a cheat sheet of search firm rebuttals, and I know that sounds crazy, but it's a one pager, and it really is anticipating things that either hiring managers are going to bring up about why they want to use a particular search firm. And if they don't bring it up, it's an opportunity for you to use that as a pitch for why you want to use an internal team. And so here, some examples of my cheat sheet is so a hiring manager says, well, you know what? I really want to use this niche firm because they specialize in X, and they will know everyone in that space. And my favorite answer is no one knows everyone, period. And typically what happens when you go to these niche firms is they recycle the usual suspects. So what happens if you have an internal team, you get a true, literally fresh, exhausted, comprehensive, universal search. So it's not recycling the usual suspects. It's not just going to the people that you have relationships with, although those are factors in it. But what you do is there's a scientific, you target companies, you identify the individuals that you want to reach out and tell them that they're about to embark on a new career that they didn't even know that they were thinking about, cold calling essentially. But I think what's fun about that is that you get a comprehensive search, and you actually often find candidates that you never would uncover. You also find diverse candidates that have transferable skills. So it opens up the aperture in such a way that's unbelievable. But I love it. No one knows everyone. And oftentimes, when they want to use a niche firm, they're going to get the usual suspects. And another misnomer that I love to kind of counterbalance is that candidates will call the concept that candidates will call search firms back. And the truth be told is often candidates are more skeptical to call a firm back for confidentiality reasons versus calling a premier company back directly. And I used to always kind of joke when I was at Warner Brothers that the power of that little blue and gold shield, you would always get a call back, always. And so I actually think it's advantageous to be calling from internally. It's safer, it's more confident. There's more confidentiality. Then sometimes if you call with a search firm, you don't know who they're talking to. You don't know what database it's going into. So I kind of like playing around with that one. And then search firms say that they will directly handle searches. And the truth be told is that the partner will do the business development. And then they'll say, oh, I'm going to handle this hands on, I'm going to handle the search. But the reality is that they pass the search back to less senior recruiters within the organization. And it's really important to understand that when you have an internal model, we really are executing the searches. We're not passing it off to anybody else. We own the search from start to finish. And then as a kind of a caveat to that, and what's really, really important to remember is that we have to play at our A game at all times. Like, so a search firm can maybe go in and flub a search, have a bad placement, and then they just move on to the next company and they do fresh business development. If we don't internally have our internal team play at their A game at all times, we can work ourselves out of business as quick as we built it. So we can't mess up and move on to another BD opportunity in another company like a search firm can, an external search firm. So it's fun because then it's a kind of a incentive to always be numero uno and build those relationships.
You're absolutely right. It's about building those relationships throughout the career. It's not just the one and done search, but we're actually tracking candidates throughout their career for maybe that role in 2 years that they might be ready for the SVP level.
Hmm.
But without that investment, and just hiring a search firm, you're going to lose all that intel, to your point.
Completely. And what's really nice is that, especially when you're internal, you do build, it's repeat business. You build those relationships, and then they immediately think of going directly to the search professional that they just had a great experience with when another position opens up. I also like to have search professionals in internal teams just have, coffee with hiring managers and say, so what's coming up with your business? Where's your business today? Where are you going to take it? And start anticipating maybe some of their future business needs. And then what happens in anticipation is one of my favorite words, by the way, is then you can take that information, that intel, go back to the research team and start building out and mapping out key competitors, key talent. Whether you use it right away or not, you at least have it. But you've heard that that's probably going to be a position at some point, and it positions again. It takes it from reactionary to proactive, and like I said, anticipation is one of my favorite words.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think once you develop those relationships with those external candidates, they're more apt to provide you, maybe I'm not right for this, but you should talk to my colleague on the other side of the aisle. And that's something you would never get by working with an executive search firm.
Yeah.
Keep that
And
intel.
to play off of that, and that's a really, really good point, is that I've always been a believer if if I felt or we felt that we couldn't handle a search, honesty is so much better than trying to take the search and fail. So we would try to figure out alternatives. And I also think, when you have the right team, they have the ability to, it's like a SWAT team. There's always the health of an assignment. And I can remember with the Time Warner team and Warner Brothers as well, is that if a search was stalling, I never even had to step in and say, we really need to pull, more muscle behind this and help support with this assignment. The team just automatically migrated and did that. And to me, that's the definition of a true team. And I always said, we all win together or we all lose together. And shoulder to shoulder, we stand, united, we win. And but see, you can't have that if you don't have that repeat internal, connectivity. So it's exciting to really build something, build a business within a business, put the right infrastructure in place.
Now, speaking of the team, what were some of your actual statistics or metrics that and accomplishments that you had during your time at Time Warner Internal Executive Search?
Sure. And I'm excited and very proud to brag. And this is a team collective answer. Um, but we had 100% utilization by all divisions, which was very unusual for a corporate entity with a company as such as Time Warner, where it was very siloed by division. We supported divisional heads of recruitment in each of the operating units, which was about 285. And that collective group handled more than 25,000 hires annually across 8 divisions. So they had more of the recruitment, mass volume hiring. And then from a search standpoint, we successfully completed over 4,500 VP and above searches. We were one of the only internal teams that I've ever heard of that actually did board of director searches, which is a whole different animal than just C-suite searches. We did 422 C-suite assignments. And this is the drum roll. We achieved over 200 million in cost savings slash avoidance. The first year is true savings, and after that, it's cost avoidance globally for Time Warner. And we proactively introduced over 7,000 top tier diverse talent prior to positions being open. And the last 10 years that while I was there, we did not use any external search firms at all. And we even had, we were written up in the Wall Street Journal with such an extraordinary story and a business model. And I can remember, and this is again just a fun story to share, is I have a really good friend that is a partner in the entertainment space in one of the major external search firms. And they used to do quarterly meetings, and they always had quarterly meetings where they would have a list of here are key competitors of people that we want to try to get in and do business with. And then here are desired business opportunities that we want to do business with. So key competitors, business development. And my friend told me for the first time ever, Time Warner was listed as a we want to do business with, but they viewed us as a key competitor. And I thought that was just a pretty cool story to, icing on the cake, cherry on top of the sundae.
That definitely something you put on your mantle.
There you go.
So if somebody's listening right now and they want to take the first step this week, what would you say to them? Like, what advice would you give them?
So if they're interested in diving and really building out a business within a business, i.e., an internal executive search model, and today, since we're focusing on a blank piece of paper, I would say, as a starter, um, go pull the company's retained search spend for at least the last 12 months add it up, and if it's over $500,000, which in most companies hiring above VP and level and above, it will be. That already starts to structure and position your business case. You don't need a 40-page, slide deck, bigger, better, more. You really just need a one pager, one number. And if you can partner with an executive who has been maybe let down by a search firm, that's also good to kind of pull into your corner. So I think if I'm really focusing and talking to our listeners, please, please, please join us next week for part two of this series of our game changers, because this time we tackled dealing with how to build an in-house executive search model, business within a business, from a blank piece of paper. Next week, we're going to be tackling a different scenario, which is often just it uses different muscles, but it's also often harder and more challenging in terms of trying to go in and create an in-house executive search model. Not that they don't have anything in place, they actually have an existing organization, but now it's about re-engineering, enhancing, and scaling a model. And the example that we're going to talk through is talking through a very heavily matrixed, which is very complex in and of itself, global organization. So please don't miss that. And then the piece de resistance that's going to tie it all together is going to put the right infrastructure in place and how you continue to maintain it and put a scalable infrastructure in place that mirrors an external search firm that then is scalable and evolves with the business as the business evolves. So don't miss it. And I hope everybody has a terrific rest of the day. And please remember to like, follow, and subscribe. So until next time.